lights.
So it's just like, I'm just going, like, work from here, like. Sometimes I'm
Brad, you got an
frustrated,
antique,
so
don't you?
much done.
And then.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started. I think trailer's not going to be here anyway, right?
Right.
Yeah. Call to order the meeting of the March 21st council meeting. Please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First up is the approval of the memorandum of the March 7th, 2022 regular meeting. A copy's been posted. Are there any questions from councilors? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
First by Councilor Garrett, second by first by Councilor Choi, second by Councilor Garrett. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 favor, 0 opposed. Up next is request to speak on agenda items. Amy, do we have any requests to speak?
No, we have no request to speak this time.
Very good. Up next would be the mayor administration update. Amy, do we have an administration or mayor update?
No, we have no update.
President Plunkett,
Yes.
since the mayor chose once again not to update us, could I kind of go over again what my concerns are, if you
Sure.
don't mind me having the floor?
Sure.
So we keep talking about access to financial information and the lack of this council, and really this community is seeing. I sort of wanted to clarify, I guess, or talk through what it is we're concerned about and what it is that we're not concerned about. So we're not concerned about the budget, right? The budget is set every year. The department heads, the mayor go through and provide the information to the council. The council may make adjustments, and then we go through a process of approving it and submitting it to the State Board of Accounts. The problem here is really the access to that information that correlates to that budget. So I kind of want to go through a timeline here, if you'll give me a couple minutes to just sort of go through how we got to where we are today. So in April 6th of 2020, going back this far, there was ordinance number 2020-03, which is to create a position of CFO here at the town of Zionsville. And that was the mayor's request. And her direct words were, we need to, quote, grow the skills and capacity in the area so we're not relying on external consultants to help us with our financial operation. We agreed with that concept. We approved that concept, and subsequently a CFO, Tammy Havard, was hired. She then later came to us on October 29th, 2020 in a special meeting for an additional appropriation. This is resolution 2020-15 for an appropriation of $284,160. And this was for, in her words, and this is Tammy Havard's words, this is in the actual resolution. The purpose of the additional appropriation is to pay for a payroll/human resources information system and a cloud-based ERP system, which includes financials, budgeting, planning, reporting transparency, and permitting, licensing, and code enforcement modules. Ms. Havard in the meeting directly says, if you go back and watch this on YouTube, a reporting and transparency portal is also a part of the project, so that I'm excited to bring before it to council and the public as well. So transparency was one of the key elements of this. So the appropriation was approved, and the system that we selected was called OpenGov. And at some point, I don't know the exact date, our longtime financial partner, Crow, was replaced by the administration with a group called Financial Solutions Group. That wasn't anything that the council had any action on. It wasn't required to have action on. But part of that responsibility was help with the implementation of OpenGov. Following the approval of funds for OpenGov, the old financial system was taken down before the new one was brought up online. So that is what I would call a worst practice. I don't know why that was happened. When we pressed the administration on the matter, we were told that that was done because there was no financial information, not financial resources to run parallel systems, although there was never an ask of this council for financials to run parallel systems. And then in October of 2021, the mayor created what she called her finance committee to review, update, and create financial policies. I know Councilor Traylor, who's not here today, was appointed as a member To my knowledge, that committee has met once just to introduce each other and has had 4 of the subsequent meetings all canceled. And then in December of 2021, the mayor removed the CFO from her position. So in the last 17 or 18 months, this council has received limited financials only 3 times when we should be getting them monthly. And I don't think they're being hidden from us. I just don't think that they have that information because of, well, I don't know why. I'm assuming it's because of this new system. So I really want 4 questions answered. And these aren't hard questions. And quite frankly, I'd even think I don't know is an answer to these questions, but some dialogue would be appreciated. One is, what happened to put us in this situation? I don't need an entire root cause analysis yet, but I just want to know what happened. Why are we not getting financials? 2 is, where are we here? Where are we today? How are we running the town right now with incomplete financial systems and an understaffed financial team? 3 is, what is it going to take to get us to steady state and working? So what people are needed? Is that hires? Is that consulting? What is the cost of that? And more importantly, what is the timeline of that? And 4 is, when is a new CFO going to be hired? It's now been 4 months. I don't know where that is in the process. What I don't want is the mayor giving us another Facebook statement after this meeting or another press release. I would like her to come here and have a dialogue with this council about what I think is a major problem for this community. And why does it matter to you? Why does this matter to the public? Well, one is, imagine trying to run a $30 million business with no access to financials. That's just blows my mind that is even happening. But we can't make solid decisions in these council meetings if we don't have financials, whether they're tactical decisions or whether they're strategic decisions. But 2 is, I think we are at a real risk, as the state may get involved in this, of having our debt downgraded because we don't have accurate financial information. And if we get our debt downgraded, that is going to be more expensive to us. That limits our bonding capacity. And that is something that we have always maintained for years and years and years as a community that you can rely on if Zionsville is issuing debt. So I think this is a big deal. I think the mayor needs to address the council. The mayor's own campaign materials, one of her guiding principles was, quote, "We are transparent and accountable regarding the business of the town." That is a direct quote. She needs to be transparent. She needs to be accountable as to where we are. If these meeting times don't work, then I would like her to submit another meeting time that works for her schedule. We can call a special meeting, but again, it needs to be open to the public, not some closed door discussion about what's happening. I think the public should have a right to hear what is going on. I'm not going to vote on any claims until I hear this information because I don't feel confident doing that. And I know that it's draconian and I know that may hurt our vendors, but I don't think I'm asking hard questions. And so that is where I'm at right now. And I would like some answers. And I appreciate the time, President Blanca.
Fair enough. I will say obviously due to open door laws, we were limited as it relates to the number of counselors that could participate in a call regarding finance last week, but we did have a brief call. And I think the reality is we're just in a spot where currently the vendor can't provide on the finance end what we're asking. To your point, I'm hopeful that, the mayor would come and talk a little bit more detail about that to the public. And without getting into all the details, I do feel like Tim Berry is confident that between Crow and Cindy, they can prepare that and have that information for us by the next council meeting, a monthly report by the next council meeting.
Great.
I'm sorry.
I said great.
Yeah, so there's quite a bit going on. And I think that as we continue to dig deep into the finance question, we're going to continue to have more details relayed to us that I think should be relayed publicly, because again, these are questions that we've had for quite some time, for 17 months.
Well, and these are the questions that start leading to more questions. Like, why did we pick a financial system that cannot create financial reports? Like, you had one job. And you weren't able to do that one job. Like, I don't know. So we paid a lot of money for that. I mean, we paid $284,000 for the system, let alone the implementation. So is the system we picked bad? Is the implementation we paid for go wrong? I mean, and I realize these systems aren't always perfect, but we have no backup. So this is incredibly concerning to me that we are sort of running blind right now. We could be running into a wall and have no idea.
Yeah. Fair enough. Excuse me. Up next is old business. Of consideration of ordinance approving the American Rescue Plan Act. This is ordinance 2022-04. This is a final reading. Heather, I believe you're going to present on this.
I will. Thank you, Mr. President. This is a final reading of the American Rescue Plan Act ordinance. This is basically setting our initial plan for the town so that we can be able to start to spend the resources that we've been given by the federal government for this purpose. As you all may recall, what we are currently doing is sweeping the majority of the funds that we received into a bucket called basically recovery, lost income, recovery of income. That's a pretty flexible bucket and will allow us to go back and work with members of the public as well as the administration, kind of prioritizing what projects and programs we want to spend those resources on. The other part of this ordinance is we're setting up a premium pay bucket, if you will, which will allow us to provide premium pay stipends to first responders, those individuals who are really, on the front lines in our police and fire departments during COVID-19, when the rest of us were at home, shut down due to the pandemic. So at this time, we're focusing on those employees. Just as a side note, we had talked at the last meeting unrelated to this particular ordinance, but two corresponding pieces that will need to be done before we can pay the premium pay stipends to our first responders. One, we'll need to do an additional appropriation. We were hoping to do that at this meeting and have the public hearing. There was an error in the numbers. Two employees were inadvertently missed that fell into that same category. So we do need to go back and republish, and that's something that we're already, working on. And we'll get that done, and it'll be available for the April 11th meeting. The second change we need to make after the additional appropriations been considered is a change to the salary ordinance. And that will also be at our April 11th meeting. We were hoping for both of those pieces today, but because they are sort of hand in glove, we will just hold off on both until the next meeting. So today we're only voting on the initial plan and the second reading of the ordinance.
Heather, that the verbiage omitted two members from the fire department, and the numbers that we had one that was missing, which is why the numbers were off, correct? So when we move forward with this, we need to approve this with an amendment to this.
I don't think so.
Ordinance,
Both Joe and
correct?
I looked at it, and I don't think we need to change the underlying ordinance, as I understand it, Joe, right? Yeah.
Okay.
So we didn't have any of the numbers actually embedded here. We just put the framework, the guidelines for the premium pay stipend itself. So you may recall we had up to $5,000. There's a very challenging, kind of back end math that you have to do according to the State Board of Accounts for each employee. So not every single employee is going to see that full amount just based on the number of days worked and the number of days that were in the eligible category. But with respect to what we have, we don't need to change anything in this particular document.
So what we passed before on first reading didn't have a dollar amount at all listed?
It had a dollar amount for the total amount that we've received, but not for the specific allocation.
It had an estimated amount, but not a
Yeah.
definitive amount.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we have the premium pay to eligible workers amount. But I think we can go back and, amend that. I don't know that we need to change it at this time.
Okay. That's what I was worried about.
Yeah. If we do, we'll go back and look at it. If we do, we can bring that amendment back. But Joe, I mean, do you think we need to, maybe Joe could come up and I'm basing it off of the information that I was received, but I mean, we could amend the number here. There's one reference of the estimated cost, Joe, in the document itself. The 623,162. So do you think we should go ahead and verbally amend that up to the new amount?
From a legal perspective, I would leave that to you. The ordinance does not need when I say ordinance, I'm talking about the salary ordinance. It's general enough that it does not need to be updated.
Okay, I think I'm just going to go with my gut and say, as we're talking this through, I'm thinking we can go ahead and just, if the council's open to it, amend the two references to the total amount of the premium pay stipend. And Joe, do you have the final amount? I can look it up here real quick.
I did not believe I was going to speak today, so I don't have that
Okay,
number
no
with me.
worries. Let me find it.
So Joe, we had a conversation last week where one of your concerns was that the specific dollar amount was too low to include what we wanted.
Correct.
And so that's why
Just the
I'm
figure.
overly cautious. Now, you've talked to Heather since then, and you guys have determined that that's not a concern. So I'm just kind of coming back. From
Yeah.
Your initial concern to me.
We talked about this and we've had a lot of back and forth because the numbers, have changed a little bit. I think what we are going to publish our additional appropriation at is $700,000. That gives us some flexibility so that if the amount were to change between now and the next meeting. So there are three places that is referenced in the current document, replacing the number $623, $623,162. If I could have a motion just to move that to 700 in all references in the document, then we'll go back and make sure that's changed to match the additional appropriation. That way we won't have any concerns as we move forward. Would that work for you?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it's probably safer just to do it now. That way you don't have to backtrack later and we don't have to delay any of the
Agree.
payments.
Agree. And that gives us flexibility. We don't anticipate that to be the final amount. But what we'll do is just hold it there. We can always then, once we decide to amend the plan to, spend down other categories, we can always shift it back. This is a living, breathing document. So.
And Heather, there was adding those two additional positions needed to be specified, but I don't think that's what you're approving today.
No, right. Yeah, we'll do that in the
Just to
salary
clarify.
ordinance, right?
Clarify the
Yeah,
clarification.
exactly.
Okay, well, that was my question. That's what I was asking
Yeah.
about the two employees, if we need to include that in this ordinance or if it's in the next one.
Yeah, we don't have any of the employees listed specifically. We had that as background information for the council, I believe, just as one of the documents that was in your packet. So this today, we're just, what this ordinance is doing is just basically saying how we're going to start to allocate the money we're receiving from the federal government. So really, the only amendment I would ask for is just amending that amount to 700,000, knowing we're not going to go up that high, but that gives us flexibility as we make sure the math is, correct and ready to go for the next meeting. So that way, when we vote on April 11th, that will allow our first responders to see those stipends by the end of April in their payroll.
Why are you asking us to go $78,000 above our initial request?
Yeah, so there were two
For
employees
two employees.
that were missing. And I think what we decided in the additional appropriation, just because this math, it's just to make sure we have everyone included and that the math is correct. We could put the specific dollar amount, which I can find for you, but just to give flexibility, my concern was something would slightly shift between now and the April 11th meeting. And I just didn't want to be in a position where we'd have to start the process again, because the additional appropriation process is you have to publish it for the notice. You have a 10-day, at least 10 days advance notice, and then you have to have a public hearing. So you never have to spend by law the full amount of what you publish, but you can't go above that amount. So that was sort of where we were today. The law doesn't allow to go above where we publish the additional appropriation notice, but it does allow us to go below it. So what we can do at the next meeting is
Okay.
just approve the amount that's correct,
That's fine.
and we won't approve the whole amount. That'll leave it in the fund.
Mr. President, you want to wait till new business for a motion, or would you entertain one now?
Can we keep asking questions before we do motions? Is that all right? Our reserve ZPD officers are volunteers, therefore I assume they are not eligible for a bonus like our reserve
They were not
fire.
included.
Not included, but I assume they're also not eligible because they're not paid anything,
Correct.
correct?
Right.
Okay. I am interested in increasing the part-time bonus for ZFD, as I've learned well, really, we only have one part-timer, but as I've learned how that part-timer has been able to fill in for shifts and kind of have to rearrange their own life, much like some of ZFD and ZPD has had to do. Is that something we're able to do if I wanted to increase that? This is my own personal preference from like
You-
1,500 to say 3,000 for the part-time role?
So I'm good. Yes. Just to be clear, I'm looking to Joe because is it only one employee that would be impacted?
Correct.
If we go to the 700,000, is that going to be enough?
Perfect example. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. And that should be enough to cover that person? Okay. Yes. Okay.
So we don't need to spell that out in any way. That's.
I would make a motion
Yeah.
to spell
so
out both of those.
We would have to make a
some,
motion because
if
we've got a
supportive.
part-time.
Up to 3,000 instead of up to 1,500, as well as the increasing the estimated cost to
Yeah.
700,000.
And we have, let me see.
Unless there's any objection to that.
I think Heather's already touched on this, Craig, but Councilor Melton, but that was partially why I shared with her, like, listen, let's just bump this up because we can't, once we publish the number,
Gotcha.
we can always spend under, but we can't publish over. And that's the situation we're
I
in. where we
just,
would
I
have
just
had to-
didn't want there to be free reign on the rest of that money
Yeah, no, that's right.
by the administration or anybody else.
Yeah,
So that's my concern.
yeah. And that money, that unspent money, we'll wait till Heather's done, but I believe that unspent money just sets in the lost revenue account.
It's specifically earmarked for this
Yeah.
purpose, so it can't go into.
Yeah,
I'm assuming it'd be unearmarked once it's spent, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Remainder.
Yeah, once we're done with this and the balance is there, I'm assuming that we can then just take that
Shift
amount
it
and
back
move
over
it
to
back,
the
shift it
lost
back,
revenue.
correct, and then reallocate it as plans are developed.
Heather, we've had a little bit of a sidebar here.
Sorry, we were too.
That's all right. We just want to make sure. So we go up to 700 and let's say the number comes out to 645. That remaining money, does that go into the lost revenue fund or is that just stay earmarked for this? or
It'll
do we
stay
need-
in the premium pay bucket, but we can always go back when we decide what projects we want to spend on and move it to something else.
Or can it be used for maybe another round of premium pay if we decide to do that?
Yes, it definitely could.
Okay.
Yeah. We've got two amendments. So Joe was just sharing with me that because the two individuals who were missing, one was the public educator in the fire department, and then the EMS manager in the fire department. So if you look at our categories, if you're in the ordinance under number 1, it says premium pay for essential workers. And it says one-time payments to members of the Zionsville Fire Department required to respond to calls and emergencies in the following amounts. We do need to add a 4th bullet there that will say up to $5,000 to a public educator or EMS manager, or we could split it into 2, whichever your preference is. So we could do one up to $5,000 for the public educator, up to $5,000 for the EMS manager. So I've now got 3 total amendments, I think.
Yeah.
I think I can make this motion when we're ready.
Yeah, go ahead.
We good? Okay. I would make a motion to approve ordinance 2022-04 on final reading with the following amendments, modifying the up to $1,500 for part-time firefighters, not to exceed $13 an hour of work performed, to up to $3,000 for part-time firefighters, not to exceed $13 an hour of work performed. In addition, adding a bullet of up to $5,000 for public educator, EMS manager, not to exceed $13 an hour of work performed, and also modifying the estimated cost from $623,162 to $700,000. Second. Whew, glad someone seconded.
First by Counselor Garrett, second by Counselor Burke. Any questions from counselors? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Thank you very much. Moving on to new business.
Councilor Plunkett, one quick question. I know we had talked about, I know this is past, so it's not an issue, but where are we at having some sort of third party help us, or is Heather's, or is your firm helping us? Like, again, I'm just going back to my statement earlier about financials. This is a lot of money. I want to make sure that we are, once it's implemented, doing everything from a reporting structure so that when the federal government audits us, they don't say that this money was misappropriated. I know we have suggested Barnes and Thornburg as a very viable option to help us with that. I'm in favor of that. Do we know where we're at with that? Because I'm nervous as we start spending this money that it doesn't just disappear into the ether and 3 years from now we're asked to give it back and put a dent in our budgets.
Well, I think until we start doing anything beyond this, there's not a significant need for that. Is that correct, Heather?
Yeah, so we've done the initial plan, so that was something we needed to get done right away, at least to have something down on paper. I know there's discussions about hiring some sort of, legal counsel to work through the legal issues related to ARPA globally. I mean, I'm obviously going to advise the council on anything coming before the council, or if there's questions that you all may have. The Crow is also engaged from a spending compliance perspective. So as part of the agreement that the town is engaging Crow for, that will cover advice related to ARPA. So Tim and his team's going to be looking at that as well. And then I also know, I see Cindy in the back. So Cindy also went to a training last week, sharing some additional compliance information and talking about the initial report that's due in April. So I think, for now we're moving forward. I think the next big piece is just getting all of the parties to really start talking about the spending priorities, engaging, the community and determining, what that is. And there's a number of great opportunities, especially with this recovery of this bucket, of lost recovery. You can even use it, for example, for community crossings grant money, and you can use it as a match to draw down additional grant money from the state. So looking at a lot of opportunities that you all will be able to discuss and engage in. It's a much more flexible way than we previously had anticipated with the interim rule.
Okay. And I don't even want to have that discussion until we have financials, there's stabilized financials. Like this is a pecking order of understanding where our finances are, understanding where those holes are. This will be a long process, but I want to get those financials first before we start figuring out how to spend additional monies. Just my 2 cents.
Counselor Garrett, is there anybody beyond the fire department and police department that you would be willing to have that conversation with the remainder of that $700,000 potentially for them getting some kind of rescue money? I feel like I mentioned this last time. I just feel like there's people that are missed in this large police and fire first responders thing ordinance, and it's really important to me to note that, because we have people, specifically again IT, that functions and makes all of the police and firemen's laptops function and make sure that we're live streamed to the public. So there is so publicly everybody does see what we do on a daily basis. And I just am frustrated because we didn't include that in that ordinance, and I didn't make that motion to try and include that there. But I just wanted to hopefully, get you continuing to think about potentially if there is a remainder balance on this, and we are allowed to spend that on specifically the IT department in the future. So I understand you want to get financials for the town, but I think there are people that really were working very diligently and hard, specifically the IT department, that should have been included, in my opinion, in that last ordinance. But I think I'd be willing to wait as long as hopefully you can have that conversation with us later.
Yeah, we'll have certainly any conversation.
Thank you.
I mean, I think from the beginning, we've been on the side of, listen, people who are eligible and, should certainly be considered. This was just something that when we initiated this discussion about first responders, those were the only folks that were eligible, because it was 8 months ago. So that's what kind of put this in motion. But now that we got through this, hopefully we can certainly look at some of those other areas.
Thank you.
So All right, up next, new business. We have a right-of-way encroachment appeal. And I've got two folks to present here, Mr. and Mrs. Andrews and Lance.
Thank you for having us. I'm Darren Andrews. This is my wife, Shelley. And we're here to discuss the appeal for the encroachment, the basketball goal we put up at 900 Tilson Drive. We believe that the concerns that were raised in the appeal have been somewhat mitigated, namely the snow removal issue. We believe when we put the goal up, we took measures to offset and mitigate those when the goal was installed. We set it back 6 feet from the side of the curb. Our cul-de-sac is extremely large. We only have 4 driveways in the cul-de-sac. And it's a 13-home neighborhood, so it's not a busy neighborhood. We also have no sidewalks. We believe it's a safe neighborhood in that regard. We also believe a precedent has been set with the number of in-ground goals, that there are in other neighborhoods in Zionsville. And before we installed the hoop, we drove around and looked at that, including consulting with the immediate neighbor next to us that was most impacted by the installation of the goal.
I do have some photos if needed of, the pictures of the large snowfall we had, and like there was no issues with the snow impacting, anyone else. There's plenty of space to put the snow. So we have the snow is all packed where the hoop was or is, and it's set back. We also, in our appeal, noted that we can do several things, like remove it when we move. We could remove it during certain times of the year if necessary. It is something that lifts out. We're willing to put, there's a lot of our neighbors have the children at play signs. Our cul-de-sac, one of the concerns was that, if we don't, the town doesn't want, or the street department specifically doesn't want kids, playing there, like Zionsville saying it's okay if there's a hoop there. Again, there's a lot of hoops in Zionsville. This is not something that's apparently new, but our neighborhood is very old, and the kids do play in our cul-de-sac all the time. There's tennis games, there's kickball games. We have a large number of kids, and we don't have a park, and we don't have sidewalks, as my husband said. So it just kind of becomes like a playground just because there's not a lot of traffic. It's a very small neighborhood. And again, had we not seen other goals around, we probably wouldn't have made that decision. We don't have an HOA. I also think the risk of if Science was concerned about our hoop remaining in place and everyone's going to put a hoop up, I don't think that's likely because most new neighborhoods seem to have HOAs. They're the new, ones. Ours was just super old. So our neighbors, we had all neighbors but one write a letter and support. They actually want the hoop. They're planning tournaments, and it's a really important part of community in our neighborhood. So, but I do think we addressed a lot of the issues in terms of concerns about the street or the snow removal and the kids playing. We also have a recently paved street, so the chance of injury is pretty small actually on the pavement itself. But there have been, I did see hoops through Zionsville, neighborhoods similar to ours that have been there for decades. So unless there's a big influx of injuries have occurred over the past several decades, I'm not sure that there was a huge concern there.
The concessions that you all were willing to make in the document that you provided to us, how is that enforceable?
I have no idea.
Do you know, Heather?
You're referring to
removing
it's
it once
actually,
your kids graduate, all
Yeah.
those kind of things.
it's actually bolted down, so it's on a platform. So
No, I mean, sorry. In
Terms
terms of how do we enforce it later?
of,
I was going to ask Lance, were those items included in your appeal documents as well?
yeah, I didn't send the snow pictures because I didn't, but I do have them here. And I can send them separately if you need to. We also have a large area in front of the next door neighbors. It's you can set a snow. There's a lot of room for snow in our neighborhood.
So I guess that's my question, Lance. Can those things then be placed into the appeal and then enforceable later on?
Good morning, Lance, killer of dreams once again. I appreciate the efforts by the petitioners to mitigate some of the concerns operationally. You will not find me changing my position on these because we do think globally. We think throughout the breadth and width of our community on all the implications. You raise a very good point. If we start making these matters of follow-up and enforcement, those things can fall through the cracks. Is it 2 years? Is it 3 years? What have you? Addressing the operational points is one issue, but the bigger issue actually with me, and I would hope that your attorney may have had some conversations or could have some conversations about this, is the general exposure liability. It's our role to protect the town from any unnecessary or frivolous lawsuits. And I think that these do present the opportunity for those. So I just have to maintain a consistent approach to the management of the rights of way, that these are not play areas, that they are for other purposes. So I'm happy to answer any specific questions. And I gave a rather succinct summary, and we could go on and on about, eventualities and what ifs, but that's that is where I stand.
So Mr. Lance, you're concerned about approving this, and then if there's a child that does get struck in the rope because we've approved a basketball goal.
I don't debate that there are goals around town, but when people come and ask what the rules are, we have to state what the rules are. So these older maverick situations that have been around for a long time, I don't debate that they're out there. But this is the first time ever that I can recall where this has been expressly asked of the council to allow us to play in the street and allow our kids to play in the street. So that changes the narrative a little bit.
But Lance, in terms of just getting us to this point today, was this something that the petitioners have come to you to say, I would like to make sure this is okay that we do this? Or was this a complaint that you went to them to say you need to remove the goal and therefore they're responding to that? And if it was, how did that come to your attention? And the other ones that may be out there, is it just that they haven't come to your attention? And so you're not seeking to go drive around looking for goals?
That is
Someone brought it
correct.
to your attention?
Yeah, this was brought to the attention of our code enforcement division in the planning department, economic development department, who manages the code enforcement. They did an investigation, found that it was placed within the right of way, and then followed the standard protocols in an after the fact application to send out to all the town departments to get opinions on this matter. So it was complaint driven.
Was it initially because it was, obviously there's the safety issue that you mentioned, and I get codifying that we're allowing something that could be a liability, even though kids play in the street everywhere. They always have.
Don't about, yeah.
Was it really kind of this, was it someone who was trying to remove snow and they were like, hey, this is really in the way? Is that what is the snow, was the snow removal the initial?
The simplest terms, a person reported this situation and said, are they allowed to do this? And of course, the answer is no, it is on public property, not without due process.
So it was really that, not snow. It wasn't in the way of snow removal. It's really public safety.
No, but since you kind of went down that operational rabbit hole, these things are adjustable. They can be lowered, and yes, they may be set 3 feet back from the curb, but you've probably all mostly seen our leaf acts and our truck systems, which need to really hug those curbs. So if those are down, our trucks are over 10 feet tall, particularly with the smokestacks up there. So as they're making an outer turn on the radius to provide services, trash trucks as well, anything that might need to utilize the whole turnaround. Again, I think globally, and you think about these appearing in other places on other cul-de-sacs, and that's my concern about operations.
So that aside, the biggest concern is the liability to the town.
I couldn't in good conscience advise you to tell people to play in the streets, but that's, a legal question that you might want to vet with your attorney if you want to defer a decision on this.
And
Does anyone know if there's how other communities may handle this? I hear what you're coming from, Lance, because I don't want then, if this is approved, 50 more basketball courts and cul-de-sacs. At the same time, I'm sympathetic towards what was done. I'm trying to wonder, is there something we can come up with that would allow the homeowner to assume the liability, whether it's to their own goal, equipment that may hit the goal or people hurt playing on the goal that absolves the town of that liability. And therefore, if it's important to them, they can take that on. Does that concept exist, Heather?
Well, so the homeowner would have, liability for any sort of action related to the actual goal. We were just talking, I mean, can you get sued on a public street? Yes. If a pedestrian gets struck, walking across the street, does it necessarily mean we're going to get sued? No, but it just depends on the litigant's frame of mind. There's always a possibility. I think the town's always open to lawsuit. You can't sort of solely mitigate. We were talking about some of the comments that the Andrews family made. You could put those into an agreement between the parties, to say this is what we're allowing you to do. You're accepting the liability for any injury. But that's only one party. There's, other people obviously who live in that neighborhood, other children who may play there. So you never know what a family's going to do. But to kind of go back to Councilor Choi's earlier comment, I mean, I think you could have an agreement between the town to say, we're approving it on, under these circumstances, you'll remove it for snow removal, all of those things. And I think I don't know if we've ever done it on an encouragement appeal, because I can't recall any that have ever been approved. Lance, looking at you
Correct.
over the last many years, but but we've done it for other types of planning, development, things that we've done in the past. So it's a possibility. And I don't know, unfortunately, what other communities do related to this.
Just anecdotally, the county highways are notorious for doing sweeps of these because you do tend to get you try and be a little bit reasonable, and they kind of crop up here and there. And if nobody's complaining or nobody's asked, am I allowed to do this? They are sort of allowed to perpetuate. But there are at least two counties I'm aware of in our vicinity that finally said, enough is enough. And they just went around with trucks and yanked everything out. So that's the only anecdotal story I have on how other communities have addressed these. As far as municipalities, I don't know.
Are there lawsuits that exist where towns, communities are sued for kids playing in the streets? And does that exist? Do we know? I mean, it's good to understand the risk, but I also understand what is the possibility of that risk?
Well, I think that we all understand that this is the end of a cul-de-sac, right? So it is relatively low volume compared to other streets. But when you consider potentially allowing these, what is the tipping point or the threshold when there's too much traffic? I think it's kind of reasonable to expect, I want to put this on Oak Street. Oh my gosh, heavens, no. But what is the point where it's okay? When there are only 5 houses beyond the goal, when there are 6 houses. So there are a lot of things. Again, I always try and preach consistency in the application of the ordinance. So if you want to start, it's fine with me. There are other people out there, I'm sure public safety agencies may want to weigh in. I don't know why I always draw the short stick to address these things, probably because I'm always the one that says no. But also consider that if you're going to look at policies and opening these types of opportunities to our community, think about what would be the thresholds. What is too much traffic? It could be on a cul-de-sac bulb. Those will be approved. Well, the next one that comes in is I'm only 1 house away from the end of the cul-de-sac. Can I have mine too? Just things to think about. I don't like to bog down meetings with all these things, but whatever you want to decide as the regulators of the right of way, we're here to implement.
If this basketball goal was of the movable variety that has sand or water, or whatever in the base, because that's not installed, does that become a non-issue, or is it still?
It is still technically an encroachment, and you still have the liability question, which I am not, is my concern that I raise, but I'm not going to opine on the ultimate amount of liability the town would face.
One other question, and this is for the Andrews. Looking at the picture at the front of your house, there's a basketball goal in the backyard too. Is that, am I looking at that correctly or not?
Yeah, that's an old broken down one.
Got it.
That we had. And there's not really enough space back there. So
okay,
we had a couple of broken windows and
Got it. Okay.
Just a comment from an experience of a right-of-way situation as it's not just the snow removal people. I myself, as a contractor with a ladder rack on our vehicles, have had an example of where I was driving down a street and I caught a basketball goal that was over my airspace, is what I was told it was called, and I drug it down the street.
How far did you drag it?
Probably to about the 3-point line.
Wow.
And my point is that I felt guilty because I'm the one that hit something that was stationary, but the reality is the goal was over the street, which is really supposed to be for a car. So through that example, I think that's something that we all need to consider as well. As I know you're on a cul-de-sac and it's not likely somebody's going to swing around, but that is an example of something that's not just snow removal related or city or town related vehicles. And it's definitely something that was kind of scary to me because I felt like I was the liable one, but it really was the homeowner that put it. And it was a movable one, of course, like your example that you just brought up. And I think that I'm of the opinion that if you bring a portable basketball goal to the street side and you play in the street, and then you remove it when you're done or pull it back into your property out of the easement, that makes more sense to me. But I'm just one person on this up here as well. And that's not exactly your case.
Sure, thank you. If I could just say that when we installed the goal, it can go up to 14 feet. So it has an adjustable height on it. And it is set, as I said, it's set back 5 to 6 feet from the edge. So the backboard actually does not protrude out into the cul-de-sac. So we deliberately did it so that it could be raised. The time it's been in, we have had snow removal. We've had obviously trash removal. Yeah, and contractors in the neighborhood. So we obviously to this point haven't had an issue, but point is taken.
I think the point I was making too is that you become the one that's liable,
Sure.
not necessarily the contractor or the vehicle,
Sure.
but
We
again,
accept
it
that.
still does slow things down if somebody does hit it.
And from my standpoint, I know that we have discussed these kind of things before, and in most cases, the people bringing the appeal don't have a whole lot of alternatives that they bring to us. And I think the Andrews have brought a lot of alternatives and solutions. So I'm of the opinion that, there are, like Lance said, it's a slippery slope as to what gets approved and then what's the next step and who do we approve next. But this seems like as a good of a choice for me to say that this is fine enough to approve an appeal. But
I think my only concern will be, I want to approve it because it's not a big deal. My only concern is coming up with a framework for how these are approved or denied. Because if we just arbitrarily do it, and this is an excessive example, but if next meeting we then have 10 basketball goals that want to be approved, when do you say yes and when do you say no? That's the only problem I run in with. I don't have a problem with their basketball goal. I think it makes all the sense in the world where it's at. But I think to Mr. Lance's point, where's the tipping point? I think if we want to approve it before we did that, we should probably come up with some sort of framework or guidelines as to what we would want or not want around that. So I don't know if that's something you want to take up, Alex, is kind of, if we continue it and create that. But that's just sort of, I guess, where I'm at. If there was a framework to say guidelines for other people, even for Mr. Lance to say, all right, well, this is where the council would say yes and where they would say no. I think that's helpful. Otherwise, we're just kind of doing what kind of mood are we in today? Very arbitrary type approval.
I understand that. This one seems more clear cut to me, and then we can work on what those guidelines might look like. But this doesn't seem to me like it falls in that gray area.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe these are maybe this is the ground rules. Maybe you need to be able to remove it. You need to be able to raise it to 14 feet. Maybe this is kind of setting that in play for us. I don't know. I kind of tend to agree with Alex. Typically we see these encroachment requests and it's because they're going over gas line or they're, they're getting closer to some type of a sanitary sewer
There are
easement
no
or something,
solutions
and
to it.
there's no way around it.
Yeah.
I guess I would ask Heather, I mean, I agree with all the sentiment here around the goal itself, right? Not necessarily, my bigger concern is listening to Lance is the risk of liability while playing in this court. Say someone falls and ends up with a concussion or worse, right? So it's not so much that the goal's in the way or it's gonna hit someone's truck. I get that, they can remove that. I'm more worried about the town's increased exposure to liability. And to Josh's point, kids play in the street. Kids could fall anywhere and get hurt. Is there liability risk in anywhere where the kids are? Probably, I guess someone could file suit. I don't think it would go anywhere. Are we adding extra exposure to ourselves by somehow allowing that this be put up, that we're somehow justifying that this is a basketball playground? So does it expose us differently than if kids just were playing in the street anywhere and hurt themselves, crashed their bike? So that's my concern, is that somehow we're approving this. And so therefore, if someone were to be hurt, we would have increased liability that wouldn't exist anywhere else on any other street.
I think we have to be a little realistic about our fears also. I mean, I work in one of the most litigious kind of fields there is, and, kids can fall anywhere and hit their heads. Doesn't mean that you're going to get sued over it. So, whether they fall in somebody's private driveway and hit their head and get a concussion versus a street, it doesn't mean that their parents are necessarily going to sue the town or that homeowner over that. So we have to be realistic about what those fears are really going to be. So, but having said that, I don't want to drag out this conversation longer than it needs to be. But I think we just need to be realistic about what those liabilities actually are and not beat a dead horse.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I was just wanting to clarify. So it's more of a question for Heather, like, is there actually increased liability? And then if there is, then, that's something that I would weigh.
Yeah, I mean, probably no more than, when we have a sidewalk, that we put in downtown and someone's walking on it and trips and hits their head. I mean, it's the same kind of, liability. I've not done a lot of research on this, so take this for what it was, but I just did a quick Google search. Noblesville has specific language. They have an actual ordinance related to permanent encroachments that talks about basketball goals and basically, says they must be removed from and not overhang the right of way in any manner from October 1st through April 30th in order to avoid damage to city vehicles that must work in the right of way for, among other things, the removal of snow, leaves, and branches and debris. City allows for mobile basketball goals and other mobile recreational equipment to be permitted without an encroachment from May 1st through September 30th in each calendar year. Basketball goals are permitted year round if properly placed 1 foot behind the sidewalk or city right of way. So there are some other communities that are, in our geographic neighborhood, if you will, that are looking at this. I mean, maybe it's something to, consider if you want to be more specific from a policy perspective. This is, just one example. I'm sure we could research it a little bit and find, several more.
Appreciate that.
It sounds like yours is further back than 1 foot from the sidewalk. Right?
Yeah, 5, 6 feet.
Can an encroachment be temporarily approved while we do more research? And like, I don't mind putting in a policy if other communities are doing it to allow this sort of stuff.
Well, we certainly could, you certainly could just hold this until the April 11th meeting. We could do some additional research to kind of get a sense of what our surrounding communities are doing. I don't think there's any requirement that we vote on it today, right, Lance? Does it have to be, is there a time frame for approval?
No, there's no time frame, and I think that since you're discussing this publicly and considering it, certainly continuing it, no one's going to run out and demand that this be removed or forcibly remove it. So I don't see really any issue of taking some time if you want to consider some policy changes for the town.
All the kids will be on spring break until then anyway, so. Yeah, that would be my recommendation to the council. That would give us a good sense of what other communities are doing. And then if this is a direction you wanted to go, we could, obviously consider, that in either the actual, how you, consider it, or, further specify it in ordinance.
So to do that, is anyone willing to raise their hand to say they want to sort of spearhead that? Because I think we need to do some research, but I would also like to include Mr. Lance in those conversations to say, hey, here's what we're thinking. What do you think? He always has a good fun police balance to it. Does everyone have alligator arms here for raising their
Well,
hand?
I mean, I can certainly do it for the council and give you 5-6 examples and share them back in a week or so. I mean,
Okay.
If that's something you guys are.
Well, but I think it'll be
interested
easier
in.
for someone to have a point. I mean, I think I agree with that. I mean, I like those examples, but I also want to hear the town's perspective of it. So we aren't just sort of hearing it blindly, and then there's at least some communication.
Counselor Garrett, I'll spearhead that.
My man. Thanks.
So then we don't have to take action on this now, or do we need a motion to do anything? or
Just,
we
I would just, a motion to
Continue. to
continue.
hold
Thank you. I
to-
couldn't get that word in my head.
Did you say Westfield, by the way, was?
This
the
was
one-
Noblesville, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's always good to get
Yeah, I
a
was
sense of
reading
what
the
other people are
Noblesville one,
doing,
too.
and we can do all the surrounding communities just to give a framework.
Well, I'll make a motion to continue this to the, unless there's any other discussion or any other questions. I'll make a motion to continue this to the 4/11 meeting.
Second.
Second by Counselor Garrett. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Coming into the home stretch. Next up is consideration of resolution to opt back into the opioid settlement. This is pursuant to Indiana Code 4-6-15-2. This is resolution 2022-03. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this, and then Jonathan Knoll, I believe, will also speak to this. Councilors, you'll likely recall last year we opted out of an opioid settlement or lawsuit. And just recently, in the last few weeks, there's been some changes to that from the state level. One of them being the specific details of potential payouts and legal fees, what we could get as opposed to what would be left up to the state completely. It also, I believe, and Jonathan can speak to this when he comes up, I believe this eliminates the restriction of potential future lawsuits. At one point, we were restricted as if we settled with the state, we could not participate in any additional lawsuits, and this kind of relieves that. So this would be a recommendation, and I'd love for Jonathan to come up and talk about opting back into the settlement.
Thank you. Good morning. And my name is John Knoll. I'm a partner at the law firm of Cohen and Malad, and Cohen and Malad is honored to be local counsel for the town of Zionsville in its litigation against the manufacturers, defendants, or distributors and dispensers of prescription opioids for their role in causing the opioid crisis that has affected so many Hoosiers around the state, including here in the town. As President Plunkett mentioned last year, the Indiana legislature passed a statute that talked about the allocation of opioid settlements when there's settlement involving the state and political subdivisions. The town, as well as the majority of local governments that had existing lawsuits, opted out of that statute for a couple of main reasons. One, at the time, the statute precluded political subdivisions from participating in future settlements. And two, at the time, the majority of the money, around 85%, would have gone to either for the benefit of the state or under state control through FSSA, and there was no guarantee of that state portion that the town would receive any of those funds. This past legislative session, the Indiana legislature passed House Bill 1193, which addresses those concerns, particularly one, the amended statute does away with the bar on future settlements, so it allows political subdivisions to participate in future settlements involving the state and political subdivisions. And two, more money going directly to political subdivisions. Works out to be about a 50-50 split between the state and political subdivisions, and that money going directly to political subdivisions based on impact. So much more direct funds to political subdivisions. So under the amended statute, it allows political subdivisions that opted out to opt back in and be able to participate in current settlements that are on the table, as well as future settlements as well. And I'm happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
Is there a time frame or a timeline, deadline that municipalities need to opt back in or they'll miss the window?
Sure. So under the statute, the deadline is July 15th. However, we are encouraging political subdivisions to opt back in soon because there is the national settlement right now with some of the defendants, mainly the three distributors. Those are Cardinal Health, McKesson, and AmerisourceBergen, and one of the manufacturers being the Johnson & Johnson entities. And those payments could start as early as around May. And so as to avoid any issues with receiving any payments, we would encourage political subdivisions to opt back in sooner, as well as if political subdivisions do not opt back in, then there's some court deadlines that start to be imposed by the end of April.
Thank you.
I know we had a lot of concerns as to why we opted out. I guess I'm just appreciative of the legislature for listening to those concerns, us and other communities, and in my mind, fixing it. So it seems like we should opt back in and join with the rest of those municipalities and communities in battling this epidemic.
Heather, does this, I know, just procedurally, if we opt back in, when this money starts to come in, do we need to open up a new fund, or does that money? John,
So
sorry.
We will, but I'm gonna
once the opt back in process is complete, we'll provide, and we've had discussions with Amy as well about kind of the process of more discussion about use of the funds, the settlement agreements, us as well as the town as part has a national consortium of lawyers as well that provide additional information on that. And that I would specifically directions best for the town needs, defer to your council on that, but we'll provide more information about use of the funds and what's in the agreements.
Sure.
Yeah, and I'm certain the State Board of Accounts will provide some guidance to, since many communities, are participating in the litigation in terms of where to receipt it and how to, what we're able to do. We're able to put it in general fund or have to put it in a special fund.
Great. Any other questions for John? I will go ahead and make a motion to opt back into, essentially approve resolution 2022-03 and opt back into the opioid settlement. Would that be the correct motion, Heather?
Yes.
Second.
Second by Councilor Burke. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you.
John, before you step away,
Yes.
do we want to go through, I know that not everybody signs everything on these other forms. Is there what steps we need to take on certification of the resolution, opt back in form, agreement for settlement, and attorney fee agreement?
Sure, that will be, defer to Amy as to the appropriate person for the council to sign on that. But you're right, there are certain forms that probably president, council, or you or other council members may need to sign, but I'll defer to Amy on that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we've got here, so what you're receiving is an actual copy of the certification for the resolution. That's going to be signed by everyone. The next document I'm sending down only needs to be signed by Jason.
Okay.
And I will add there, you'll need to provide us a certified copy of the resolution, and whoever the appropriate person is to certify that will need to sign that.
Okay. Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other matters from councilors? Up next is claims. Are there any questions about claims? or discussion about claims? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to continue claims until the next meeting, until my questions about the finance systems are answered by the mayor, including what happened to put us in this situation, where are we today, what will it take to get us to steady state and working, and when is a new CFO being hired?
Josh, Counselor Garrett, the mayor is here.
Great. Would you like to answer my questions? Okay.
I would second that motion. All those in favor, we have a motion to continue the claims to the next meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
First by Councilor Burke.
Second.
Second by Councilor Garrett. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. The next regular town council meeting is scheduled for Monday, April 11th, 2022 at 7 PM in the Zionsville Town Hall Council Chambers. Final notice will be posted in compliance with the Indiana open door law. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you.